No one believed that the rainy night my parents kicked me out in my wheelchair would lead to a lifeline worth $1.2 billion. I found my grandfather's old silver card hidden in my suitcase. When I handed it to the bank teller the next morning, she turned pale. 5 minutes later, the branch manager froze looking at the screen. My grandfather hadn't just saved me. He secretly owned my parents' entire empire. I am Monica Blake. At 32 years old, I had grown accustomed to the way people looked at me lately. They looked at the wheelchair first, then the legs that no longer moved, and finally, with a mix of pity and discomfort, they would meet my eyes. But the look Richard Hale was giving me right now was different. It was not pity. It was pure, unadulterated terror. We were sitting in the private office of the branch manager at Summit Heritage Bank in downtown Denver. The room was soundproofed, encased in frosted glass that blurred the busy lobby outside into a wash of gray and navy shapes. The air conditioner hummed with a low, expensive quiet. Richard, a man who looked like he had been born in a tailored Italian suit, was trembling. It was a subtle vibration, just enough to make the paper he was holding rattle against the mahogany desk. He looked from the scratched, tarnished silver card lying on the blotter to his computer screen, and then slowly up to me. His face had drained of color, leaving him the shade of old parchment. "Ms. Blake," he whispered, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat and tried again, aiming for professional but landing somewhere near desperate. "Do you have any idea what you are holding?" I gripped the armrests of my wheelchair. The leather was cool under my palms. "I thought it was a savings account," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. "My grandfather left it to me. I just need to know if there is enough to cover my rent this month." Richard did not answer immediately. He slowly turned his monitor around so I could see it. The screen was bright, filled with columns of data, but my eyes locked onto the bold figure at the bottom right corner. I blinked. I stopped breathing. The numbers were not making sense. I tried to read them, but my brain refused to process the length of the string. $1,200,000,000. The room seemed to tilt. The silence in the office became deafening. Pressing against my eardrums, I stared at the digits. 1,200,000,000. "This is a mistake," I managed to choke out. "This has to be a mistake." "It is no mistake," Richard said, and for the first time, he looked at me not as a woman in a wheelchair with a cheap jacket, but as something terrifyingly powerful. "This is the Legacy Access account. It has been dormant for 5 years, accumulating interest and dividends, and as of this morning, you are the sole signatory." I looked down at my hands. They were shaking now, mirroring the man across the desk. 3 months ago, I would have laughed at this. 3 months ago, I would have thought this was a prank. 3 months ago, I was not just zero, I was below zero. My life before the rain and the crash felt like a movie I had watched once and half forgotten. Back then, I was the project director at Northwind Dynamics, a position I had clawed my way up to through 80-hour work weeks and sheer grit. I lived in a sleek, organized apartment in the heart of Denver with view of the Rockies that cost me half my paycheck. But it was worth it. I had my coffee black, my schedule color-coded, and my future planned out in 5-year increments. And I had Ethan. Ethan Ward was an architect who saw the world in lines and light. He was the kind of man who would stop on a busy sidewalk to admire the cornice of an old building, dragging me into his enthusiasm until I saw it too. We were weeks away from our engagement. He had not asked yet, but I knew. I had found the ring hidden in his sock drawer, a simple vintage band that smelled of history, exactly what I would have chosen. We were happy. We were annoyingly, perfectly happy. But happiness, I would learn, is fragile. It is glass waiting to shatter. The cracks started showing not with the accident, but with my family, to the outside world. Being a Blake meant you were royalty in Colorado. My parents, Gregory and Lorraine Blake, owned Blake Urban Holdings. Their names were on skyscrapers, charity galas, and the donor walls of hospitals. They were the kind of people who did not just enter a room, they annexed it. They were also the kind of people who looked at their only daughter's career in technology as a rebellious phase, like a teenager dyeing her hair pink. I remembered the dinner we had 2 weeks before the accident. It was at their estate in Boulder, a sprawling mansion of stone and glass that felt less like a home and more like a museum where you were not allowed to touch the exhibits. The dining room table was long enough to seat 20, but it was just the three of us, separated by yards of polished wood and silence. I saw the quarterly reports for Northwind. My father, Gregory, said, cutting into his medium-rare steak. He did not look up. Their stock is down 3%. Tech bubbles burst. Monica, real estate is forever. I am happy where I am. Dad, I said, taking a sip of water. I kept my tone neutral. We had had this conversation 100 times. Happy does not pay for a mortgage when the market corrects. My mother, Lorraine, added. She was picking at a salad that looked too perfect to be edible. Your father is offering you the VP of Communications role again. It is embarrassing. Monica, people ask us why you are working for someone else, slaving away for a salary when you could be managing the family legacy. I like earning my own money, I said, my grip tightening on my fork. I like knowing that when I get a promotion, it is because I worked for it, not because my last name is on the building. Lorraine sighed, a sharp sound that echoed in the high-ceilinged room. You are so naive. You think corporate loyalty exists? You are an employee, a line item. They will kick you out the moment you are inconvenient. Family is the only safety net. The irony of her words would haunt me later. I am not coming back to Blake Holdings, I stated firmly. Ethan and I are building a life in Denver. We are good. Ethan, Gregory scoffed. The dreamer. Architects are a dime a dozen. Does he even have a partnership track yet? He is talented, I defended, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. And he loves me. Love is lovely, Lorraine said, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. But security is reality. You are walking a tightrope without a net. Monica, when you fall, and you will fall, do not expect the world to catch you. The dinner ended shortly after. It always did. I drove home that night feeling drained, the cold grandeur of my parents' house leaving a chill in my bones that the car heater could not quite chase away. When I got back to my apartment, Ethan was asleep. I did not want to wake him. So I sat in the living room and opened my laptop. I needed to see a friendly face. I needed to remember that I came from good stock, even if my parents were cold. I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Grandpa Walter. Walter Hayes had been my mother's father, but he was nothing like her. He lived in Larkspur, in a small wooden house with a porch that smelled of pine needles and rain. While my parents taught me how to maximize profit, Grandpa Walter taught me how to fish, how to listen to the wind, and how to treat the waitress with the same respect as the CEO. He had died 5 years ago, leaving a hole in my life that nothing could fill. I clicked on a video file dated 6 months before he passed. The pixelated image of my grandfather filled the screen. He was sitting in his favorite rocking chair, wearing a flannel shirt that had seen better decades. His eyes, bright blue and crinkled at the corners, looked straight into the camera. Hey there, Moneybug, his voice rasped through the speakers, warm and familiar. If you are watching this, you probably had a bad day with Greg and Lorraine. Do not let them grind you down. They measure life in square footage. You measure it in heartbeats. You are winning, even if they cannot see it. I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. It was exactly what I needed to hear. In the video, Grandpa leaned forward, his expression turning serious. Listen to me, kiddo. I know you are independent. I know you want to make your own way, and I am proud of that. But life has a way of throwing curveballs that you cannot hit. If the day ever comes when you hit the bottom, I mean the real bottom, where you have nothing left and nowhere to turn, you go to my old trunk. In the lining of the suitcase, there is a silver card. He paused, coughing slightly before continuing. I know I lived simple. I know everyone thinks I just had my pension and that little house, but I put things away. For you. When life pushes you to the bottom, my card will pull you up. But promise me, Monica, only use it when they show you who they really are. I paused the video. I remembered watching this years ago and dismissing it. Grandpa was sweet, but he lived on a fixed income. The card was probably a debit card for a local credit union with a few $1,000s he had squirreled away. A nice gesture, a safety net for a rainy day, maybe enough to buy a used car. I had closed the laptop that night, feeling comforted by his love but completely unaware of the truth. I had looked around my apartment, at the engagement ring hiding in the drawer, at my high-paying job, at my strong, capable legs. I thought I was safe. I thought the bottom was something that happened to other people. I did not know that the rain was already gathering. I did not know that in less than 2 weeks, the tightrope my mother talked about would snap, and I would fall into a darkness so deep that even a few $1,000s from a kindly old man would feel like a fortune. But sitting here now, in the silence of the Summit Heritage Bank, looking at the number $1,200,000,000, I realized 2 things. First, Grandpa Walter had been playing a game my parents did not even know existed. And second, he was right. They had shown me exactly who they were, and now I had the means to answer them. The rain started as a whisper against the windshield, a gentle rhythm to accompany the soft pop song playing on the radio. It was the kind of night that felt wrapped in cotton, insulated from the rest of the world. Ethan and I were driving back from a small dinner we had held to celebrate our unofficial engagement. The ring was on my finger, a vintage gold band that caught the passing streetlights, and I could not stop looking at it. "You know," I said, tracing the pattern of the lace on my dress, "I was thinking about something sleek for the wedding. Maybe silk, no poofy princess skirts." Ethan laughed, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he glanced over at me. "You would look good in a burlap sack, Monica, but I veto the princess skirt too. I want to be able to stand within 3 feet of my bride." "Deal," I smiled, leaning back into the leather seat. "Just you, me, and a lot of champagne." We were on the outskirts of Denver, navigating a stretch of road where the city lights faded into the shadows of the foothills. The rain suddenly intensified. It shifted from a whisper to a roar, hammering against the roof of the car like thousands of tiny stones. The wipers slapped frantically back and forth, struggling to clear the deluge. "Can you see?" I asked, sitting up straighter. "Barely," Ethan muttered, leaning forward, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "I am going to slow down." He tapped the brakes. The red taillights of the car ahead of us blurred into long, watery streaks. That was when the light appeared. It was blinding white, cutting through the darkness and the rain like a physical force. A massive pair of high beams swung around the curve, drifting into our lane. It was a semi-truck, a towering wall of steel and chrome moving too fast for the slick asphalt. Time did not stop. It stretched. It became a thick, viscous substance that I had to wade through. I saw the logo painted on the side of the truck cab as it jackknifed toward us. Silver Ridge Logistics. The silver letters seemed to glow in the chaos. "Monica!" Ethan screamed. It was a raw, terrified sound that would echo in my nightmares for the rest of my life. He yanked the wheel to the right, trying to force our sedan onto the shoulder, but the tires lost their grip on the wet road. We spun. The world became a kaleidoscope of rain, asphalt, and blinding light. The impact was not a single noise. It was a symphony of destruction. First came the screech of rubber, then the sickening crunch of metal folding in on itself, and finally, the explosion of glass. The passenger side airbag detonated into my face with the force of a prizefighter's punch, snapping my head back. I felt the car roll. Once, twice, the screeching of metal against pavement was deafening. Then, sudden, absolute silence. I was hanging sideways. My seatbelt dug into my collarbone. The smell of gasoline and hot copper filled the small space. Rain dripped in through where the windshield used to be, mixing with something warm and sticky running down my forehead. "Ethan?" I whispered. My voice was a croak. He was slumped over the steering wheel. The roof on his side had caved in. "Ethan, please!" I tried to reach for him. I told my arm to move, to reach across the console and touch his shoulder, but my body felt heavy, disconnected. My fingers brushed his sleeve. It was wet, not with rain. "Ethan!" I screamed, or I tried to. The darkness swarmed in from the edges of my vision, pulling me down into a deep, cold well. The last thing I heard was the hissing of the engine and the relentless drumming of the rain. When I opened my eyes again, the world was white, harsh, fluorescent white. The rhythmic beeping of a machine was drilling into my skull. I blinked, trying to clear the fog in my brain. I was lying flat. There were tubes in my nose, a needle in my arm. The smell of antiseptic was overpowering, burning the back of my throat. I tried to sit up. Panic surged when nothing happened. I pushed my mind to my legs. "Move," I commanded. "Kick the blanket off." Nothing. It was as if my body ended at my waist. Below that, there was only a terrifying void. "She is awake," a voice said softly. A face appeared above me. It was not Ethan. It was a doctor. A woman with graying hair and kind, tired eyes. She checked the monitors, then looked down at me with an expression I instantly recognized. It was the look people give when they are about to destroy you. "Ms. Blake," she said gently, "I am Dr. Aris. You are at Denver Health Medical Center. You were in a severe car accident." "My legs," I rasped. My throat felt like it was full of glass. "I cannot feel my legs." "Doctor," Aris placed a hand on my shoulder. It was meant to be comforting, but it felt heavy. "You suffered a traumatic injury to your spinal cord at the T10 level. We performed emergency surgery to stabilize your spine, but the damage was significant." "Will I walk?" I asked. The question hung in the air, fragile and desperate. "The swelling is severe," she said, dodging the direct answer, which was an answer in itself. "The likelihood of regaining motor function is very low. We will know more in time, but you need to prepare yourself for a different reality." I closed my eyes, absorbing the blow, paralyzed. The word bounced around my skull, but then the other memory surfaced, the truck, the blood on the sleeve. "Ethan," I said, opening my eyes. "Where is Ethan? Is he in surgery?" The doctor's face fell. The professional mask slipped just enough to show genuine sorrow. She glanced at the nurse standing in the corner, then back to me. "I am so sorry, Monica. Mr. Ward did not survive the crash. He died on impact." The scream that tore out of me did not sound human. It was a jagged, animalistic sound of pure agony. The monitors spiked, beeping frantically. I thrashed against the bed, forgetting my paralyzed legs, forgetting the tubes. I wanted to tear the IVs out. I wanted to tear the world apart. Ethan was gone. My architect of light and lines. My future, gone. They had to sedate me. I remember the cool slide of the drug into my veins, and then the blackness took me again. When I woke up the second time, the room was dimmer. A figure was slumped in the plastic chair next to my bed. "Lena?" My best friend lifted her head. She looked like a ghost. Her curly hair was matted, her mascara smeared in dark streaks down her cheeks. She had been wearing the same clothes she wore to work the day before. "Oh, Mon," she sobbed, rushing to the side of the bed to grab my hand. "Oh, God, Monica." "He is dead, Lena," I whispered, the tears leaking out of my eyes. "He is really dead." "I know," she cried, squeezing my hand so hard it hurt. "I am so sorry. I am here. I am not going anywhere." We cried together for a long time, until there were no tears left, just dry, heaving sobs. "Where are my parents?" I asked eventually, looking around the empty room. "Did you call them?" Lena stiffened. She looked away, biting her lip. "I called them, as soon as I got to the hospital." "And?" "Here," she said, handing me my phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. I dialed my father's number. My fingers felt clumsy. "Gregory Blake," he answered on the second ring. His voice was brisk, businesslike. Background noise suggested he was in a meeting or a restaurant. "Dad," I said, "it is me." "Monica," he said. There was no relief in his voice. We heard about the accident, a tragedy, truly unfortunate about the ward boy. The ward boy, not Ethan, not my fiancé. I am paralyzed, Dad, I said, my voice trembling. I cannot walk. I am in the ICU. There was a pause. I could hear papers shuffling. That is distressed news. Monica, listen, I have to ask. The police report. Did they mention fault? The other driver was a contractor for a logistics firm we work with occasionally. Please tell me you were not drinking. If Northwind or the insurance company sues, and it comes back that you were negligent, the PR blowback on Blake Urban Holdings could be complicated. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the paralysis. I was not drinking. Dad, a truck hit us. I lost my legs and my husband-to-be. And you are worried about a lawsuit? I am worried about reality, Monica, he snapped. We have investors to protect. Is Mom there? I asked, desperation making me pathetic. She is in Miami, he said. She is closing the waterfront deal. She said to tell you she will send flowers, but she cannot fly back right now. The closing is tomorrow morning. You understand. Business does not stop for accidents. Right, I said. Business. I hung up. The silence in the room was heavy. Lena looked at me with furious tears in her eyes. But I did not cry. I felt hollowed out. The hits kept coming. 2 days later, my phone rang again. It was the HR director at Northwind Dynamics. Monica, she said, her voice dripping with that fake, saccharine sympathy corporate types use when they are about to execute you. We were devastated to hear about your loss. Thank you, I said, staring at the ceiling tiles. We have been reviewing our personnel needs for the upcoming quarter, she continued, her tone shifting seamlessly to professional detachment. The project director role requires significant travel, site visits, client meetings across 3 states. Given your new medical restrictions, we have determined that you are no longer a fit for the position requirements. I can work remotely, I argued, though my heart was not in it. I can manage the team from a desk. We are restructuring, she cut me off. We need boots on the ground. We will provide you with 2 weeks of severance pay. We wish you the best in your recovery. The line went dead. In the span of 5 days, I had lost the love of my life. I had lost the use of my legs. I had lost my family, who apparently only saw me as a liability. And now, I had lost my career. I stared down at the white sheet covering my lower half. Underneath, there were legs that used to run, used to dance, used to wrap around Ethan on Sunday mornings. Now, they were just dead weight. Lena had gone to the cafeteria to get coffee. I was alone. Outside the window, the sky had turned a bruised purple. The rain had started again, drumming against the glass with the same relentless rhythm as the night of the crash. It blurred the city lights into streaks of gold and red, washing the world away. What do I have left? I whispered to the empty room. The only answer was the steady, indifferent beep of the heart monitor, proving that I was alive, even though I had no idea why. The discharge papers felt heavy in my lap, a physical weight of debt that I had no way to carry. The hospital administrator had been polite but firm. My insurance policy had reached its cap for inpatient rehabilitation. Without a supplemental plan, something I had opted out of to save money for the wedding, I was being evicted from my recovery. Lena pushed my wheelchair toward the exit of Denver Health. I could feel the tension radiating off her shoulders. She had just put $4,000 on her personal credit card to cover the deductible and the ambulance fee, emptying her savings. I tried to thank her, but the words turned to ash in my throat. Shame is a potent silencer. It will be okay, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Your parents will help. They have to. They are your parents. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Despite the cold phone call, despite the absence at the funeral, a small, childish part of me still believed that seeing me like this, broken, grieving, and wheelchair-bound, would crack the ice around Gregory and Lorraine Blake's hearts. The drive to Boulder took 45 minutes. I spent it staring out the window at the gray, overcast sky, clutching a plastic bag that contained my personal effects from the accident. A blood-stained blouse I could never wear again and a single earring. The other one was lost in the wreckage, along with my old life. When the iron gates of the Blake estate swung open, I felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. The house sat on a rise overlooking the Flatirons, a monstrosity of stone and glass designed to intimidate rather than welcome. We parked in the circular driveway. Lena helped me transfer into the wheelchair, her movements gentle, treating me like porcelain that had already shattered. The front door was opened not by my parents, but by Elias, the house manager who had worked for them since I was 10. He looked at the wheelchair, then at my face, and his professional mask slipped for a fraction of a second. "Miss Monica," he said quietly, I was very sorry to hear." "Is anyone home, Elias?" I asked. "Mr. and Mrs. Blake are in the drawing room." Lena pushed me across the threshold. The foyer was exactly as I remembered, vast, echoing, and floored with Italian marble that cost more than most people earned in a decade. The wheels of my chair squeaked against the polished stone, a sharp, intrusive sound in the mausoleum-like silence. We entered the drawing room. My mother, Lorraine, was descending the floating staircase. She was wearing a silk sheath dress in charcoal gray, her hair pulled back in a severe, flawless chignon. She stopped 3 steps from the bottom when she saw us. She did not rush to me. She did not cry. She looked at the wheelchair, then at my paralyzed legs, and finally at my face. Her expression was not one of horror or sympathy. It was the look one might give a stain on a new rug, a mixture of annoyance and calculation. "You are out of the hospital," she stated. It was not a question. "Insurance kicked me out," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Mom." Gregory was sitting in a leather wingback chair by the fireplace, reading a financial dossier. He closed the folder slowly, took off his reading glasses, and looked at me. "We assumed you would go to a specialized facility, or back to your apartment." "I cannot go back to the apartment," I said. "It is a 3rd-floor walk-up. There is no elevator, and I took a deep breath, swallowing my pride. "I cannot afford a facility. I lost my job. I lost everything." Lena stepped forward, her hands gripping the handles of my chair protectively. "She needs a place to stay. Mr. Blake, just for a while. Until she learns how to navigate this, she needs her family." Gregory stood up. He walked to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn. "Leave us. Elias," he said without turning around. The house manager nodded and disappeared, closing the double doors behind him. The silence that followed was suffocating. "I am not asking for money," I pleaded, looking from my father's back to my mother's cold eyes. "I have my disability checks coming. I will hire my own nurse. I just need a room. The guest wing is empty. I just need a roof over my head while I figure out how to live like this." Lorraine walked over to the sidebar and poured herself a glass of sparkling water. The ice clinked against the crystal. "A nurse," she repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it sour. "Coming in and out of the house, medical equipment, vans in the driveway." "It is temporary," I said. "Monica," Gregory turned around, his face impassive. "We have investors coming here 3 times a week. We host dinners for the partners at Goldman and the City Zoning Board. This house is not just a residence. It is an asset. It is the face of Blake Urban Holdings." I stared at him, not understanding. So, he continued, his voice level. "Optics matter. We are currently trying to secure capital for the new Skyline project. It requires projecting strength, vitality, the future. Having an invalid living in the East Wing, rolling around the hallways. It raises questions. It makes people speculate about genetic weakness. It makes the atmosphere depressing." I felt the blood drain from my face. "An invalid? Dad, I am your daughter." "You are a daughter who made very specific choices," Lorraine interjected, leaning against the piano. "We offered you a position, a secure future, You spat in our faces to go play project manager for a startup. You chose a fiancé who brought nothing to the table. And now look at you. What does that have to do with this? Lena snapped, her voice shaking with rage. She was in an accident. Her fiancé died. Lower your voice in my house, young lady, Lorraine said, her eyes narrowing. It has everything to do with this. If Monica were part of the family business, we could spin this, a tragic hero, but she is unemployed. She is disabled. If the press gets wind that she is living here, they will swarm. Blake heiress, crippled and destitute. It smells of failure. Who will invest in a family that cannot even keep its own house in order? Something inside me snapped. The grief I had been holding back, the polite deference I had been trained to show them since birth, it all shattered. Failure? I screamed. The sound tore at my throat. I almost died. I was in the ICU for a week. You never came. I laid there, terrified, unable to move my legs, waiting for my parents, and you never came. We were closing a deal, Gregory said, checking his watch. Ethan is dead, I shouted, gripping the wheels of my chair until my knuckles turned white. We buried him 3 days ago. Lena and I buried him. You did not even send a card. You did not even ask if I wanted to be buried next to him if I didn't make it. We sent flowers to the funeral home, Lorraine said dismissively. Or my assistant did. I am sure they were tasteful. I do not care about the flowers, I yelled. I care that I am your child. I am sitting here, begging you for a corner of a house that has 10 bedrooms, and you are worried about what the zoning board will think? Gregory walked over to me. He loomed over the wheelchair, using his height to assert dominance. Let us be clear. Monica, your life is the sum of your choices. You chose to drive in the rain that night. You chose to be in that car. You chose to ignore our advice for years. We do not have an obligation to pay the price for your mistakes. My mistake? I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Getting hit by a truck was my mistake? Driving a compact car on a highway at night in a storm is a risk assessment failure, Gregory said coldly. We warned you that the world is unforgiving. You thought you knew better. Now you are learning. Lorraine set her glass down. We are not heartless, Monica, but we are realists. You staying here is impossible. It is disruptive. And quite frankly, looking at you like this, it is unpleasant. It is a constant reminder of wasted potential. She walked to the intercom on the wall and pressed the button. Elias, please have Miss Monica's suitcase placed on the front porch. The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. They were not just saying no. They were evicting me. You are kicking me out? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Now? Tonight? It is for the best, Lorraine said, smoothing her skirt. Better you go now, before the neighbors see you, before the press smells a tragedy and attaches themselves to our gate like leeches. Go to a shelter, or stay with your friend. You wanted independence. Monica, here it is. Gregory turned his back on me, returning to his chair and his dossier. Goodbye, Monica. Do not come back until you have fixed yourself. We do not do charity cases, not even for family. I looked at them, the two people who had given me life, and felt a severing so complete it was almost audible. There was no anger left, just a cold, hollow void where my love for them used to be. Let's go. Lena, I said. My voice was dead. Lena was crying, her hands shaking as she grabbed the handles of my chair. She spun me around, and we headed for the door. The sound of my wheels on the marble was the only noise in the house. Neither of my parents looked up as we left. Outside, the air had turned frigid, the rain had started again. A light, freezing drizzle that pricked at my skin. My suitcase was sitting on the wet stone of the porch, looking pathetic and small. Elias was standing there, holding the door. His eyes were red-rimmed. I am sorry, Miss Monica, he whispered as we passed. He slipped a $20 bill into my jacket pocket. It is all I have on me. Thank you, Elias, I choked out. Lena grabbed the suitcase with one hand and pushed me with the other. We moved down the long, winding driveway. The automatic gates began to close behind us, the heavy iron bars shutting out the warmth and the light of the mansion. I sat there in the rain, shivering, water soaking through my thin jacket. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The screen lit up with a notification from my bank. Balance alert. Account ending in 449. Available funds. $12.50. I stared at the number. $12. That was what I was worth. Behind me, the gate clicked shut with a metallic finality. I was 32 years old, paralyzed, widowed, and homeless. The rain mixed with the tears on my face, tasting of salt and despair. I looked at the dark road ahead, winding down toward the city, and wondered if it would have been better if the truck had just finished the job. The apartment was on the third floor of a pre-war brick building on the edge of the Capitol Hill district. It had character, which is real estate code for drafty windows and plumbing that groaned in the middle of the night. But its most defining feature, at least for me, was the lack of an elevator. There were 48 steps between the street and the front door. Every time I needed to leave the apartment for a doctor's appointment or a physical therapy session, the reality of my new life slapped me in the face. Lena, who is 5 feet 4 inches tall and built like a marathon runner rather than a weightlifter, had to carry me. We had a routine. I would wrap my arms around her neck, burying my face in her shoulder to hide the tears of humiliation, and she would hook her arms under my knees. She would grunt with the effort, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts as she navigated the narrow stairwell. Every step was a reminder that I was literally a heavy burden on the only person who had not abandoned me. Sometimes, when her back was spasming from a double shift at the diner where she worked, we had to hire a neighbor's teenage son to help. I would pay him $20 from my dwindling cash reserves to carry me down like a sack of laundry. He was nice enough, but he avoided eye contact, and I could feel him flinch when my dead legs bumped against the railing. The physical therapy sessions were their own circle of hell. I was going to a community clinic now, a place that smelled of bleach and stale sweat, far removed from the private rooms at the hospital. My therapist was a man named Dave, who had forearms like tree trunks and an optimism that felt almost cruel. "Come on, Monica," he would say, sweat dripping down his nose. "Focus on the big toe. Send the signal. Brain to nerve. Nerve to muscle." I would lie on the vinyl mat, my teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached, screaming silently at my right foot. "Move. Just twitch. Please." I visualized the pathway. I imagined electricity shooting down my spine, bypassing the scar tissue, hitting the muscle. I strained until black spots danced in my vision and my shirt was soaked through with perspiration. But the toe never moved, not a millimeter. It remained as still as stone. "Maybe next time," Dave would say, wiping his forehead with a towel. "The nerves are in shock. It takes time." But I knew the statistics. I had read the medical journals late at night on my phone. With a complete injury at the T10 level, the chances of walking again were less than 5%. I was fighting a war I had already lost. The financial bleeding was faster than the physical healing. The bills arrived daily, a relentless tide of white envelopes that piled up on Lena's kitchen counter, ambulance fees, anesthesiology bills that insurance deemed out of network, copays for medication to stop the nerve pain that felt like fire ants eating my legs at night. Lena never complained, but I saw the notices. The rent was late. The electricity bill had a red final warning stamp. She was picking up extra shifts, coming home at 2 a.m. smelling of grease and exhaustion, and sleeping on the couch so I could have her bedroom. I could not watch her drown because of me. One Tuesday afternoon, while Lena was at work, I called a pawn shop. I had to pay the neighbor kid an extra $10 to wheel me 6 blocks to the shop. The man behind the counter had a loop in his eye and dirt under his fingernails. He took the ring, the vintage gold band Ethan had bought, the symbol of a future that died on a rainy highway, and weighed it on a small digital scale. "It is old," he grunted. "Cut is a bit dated." "It is an heirloom," I said, my voice hollow. "It is worth $3,000, at least." "Gold price is down," he said, not looking up. And the diamond has a carbon spot. $800. 800? I choked. That is insulting. Take it or leave it. I looked at the ring one last time. I remembered Ethan's face when he showed it to me, the way his eyes lit up. I wanted to snatch it back and scream, but then I thought of the eviction notice I had found in the trash can that Lena tried to hide. Deal, I whispered. I left the shop with $800 in cash. It felt like I had sold my soul for rent money. But the final blow was not financial. It was legal. I had tried to pursue a claim against the trucking company. Silver Ridge Logistics. It seemed straightforward. Their driver had crossed the center line. Their truck had killed my fiancé and paralyzed me. It should have been an open and shut case for maximum liability. But for weeks, the lawyer I had found, a kind but overworked man named Mr. Quash Henderson, had been hitting walls. They are stonewalling us. Monica, he told me over the phone, his voice frustrated. Every time we request the driver's logs or the vehicle maintenance records, they file a motion to delay. They have a legal team that costs more an hour than I make in a month. Who is representing them? I asked. A firm called Sterling and Vance. My blood ran cold. Sterling and Vance was not just a law firm. They were my father's pit bulls. They had represented Blake Urban Holdings for 20 years. I did some digging on my laptop that night. It took me 3 hours to follow the paper trail, but I found it. Silver Ridge Logistics was not an independent company. It was a subsidiary of a holding shell that was 49% owned by Blake Urban Holdings. My parents were not just protecting a business partner, they were protecting themselves. If Silver Ridge was found negligent, the liability could blow back on the parent company's stock price. 2 days later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown. Ms. Blake, a smooth baritone voice said, "This is Arthur Sterling." I knew the voice. He had been to Christmas parties at my parents' house. He had given me a fountain pen for my high school graduation. "Mr. Sterling," I said, gripping the phone. "I am calling on behalf of the parties involved in the incident on the highway," he said, his tone conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "We understand that this has been a difficult time for you. The litigation process can be long, painful, and public. No one wants to see your medical history dragged through the courts." "Is that a threat, Arthur?" I asked. "It is a reality check," he replied. "However, the company is willing to offer a compassionate settlement to expedite the closure of this matter. We are prepared to offer you a one-time payment of $50,000. $50,000? I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "My medical bills are already over $100,000. Ethan is dead. I will never walk again. And you offer me $50,000? "It comes with a non-disclosure agreement," he added smoothly, "and a waiver of all future claims against Silver Ridge and its affiliates. It is a generous offer, Monica. Considering the road conditions were poor and you were driving a small vehicle, a jury might find you partially at fault." "My father put you up to this," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "He is trying to buy me off so his stock does not dip." "Your father wants what is best for everyone," Sterling said. "Take the money, Monica. Clear your debts. Move on. It is the smart play." I hung up. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a satisfying crack. They did not care. They truly, deeply, did not care. My parents were willing to let their own daughter starve, let her drown in medical debt, and actively block her from getting justice for the man she loved, all to save a percentage point on a quarterly report. That night, the darkness was absolute. I lay on the lumpy mattress in Lena's living room, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. I was tired, not just sleepy, but a deep, marrow-level exhaustion. I was fighting a war on all fronts, physical, financial, emotional, and I was losing on every single one. I thought about Grandpa Walter. I remembered his voice from the video, telling me I was stronger than I thought. "You were wrong, Grandpa," I whispered into the dark. "I am not strong. I am broken." Lena came home late again. She looked defeated. She sat on the edge of the couch, smelling of diner coffee. she said softly. "We need to talk." "They are evicting us, aren't they?" I asked. "The landlord raised the rent," she admitted, looking down at her hands. "I cannot cover it, not with the extra costs." She took a deep breath. "My parents called. They have that duplex in Ohio. They said we can come stay there, rent-free. It is accessible, no stairs." Ohio, 1,000 miles away, living in another person's guest house, another charity case. "I cannot do it, Lena," I said. "I cannot be the poor, crippled friend living in your parents' basement." "What choice do we have?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. "We have no money. We have no home." "I need something," I whispered. "I need something that is mine. I cannot just disappear." "We are packing tomorrow," she said, her voice final. "I am sorry, Monica. I really am." The next morning was a blur of cardboard boxes and packing tape. The sound of tape ripping off the roll was like a screeching bird in the quiet apartment. I sat in my wheelchair, folding clothes, feeling useless. Lena was clearing out the closet where she had shoved my suitcase, the one thing I had brought from my old life. She pulled it down from the top shelf. It was an old leather trunk that had belonged to Grandpa Walter. I had used it to store my winter coats. As she pulled it down, her grip slipped. The heavy trunk hit the floor with a thud. Clank! A sharp metallic sound rang out. It was not the sound of clothes hitting the floor. It sounded like something hard hitting something else hard. "What was that?" Lena asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. She unzipped the suitcase. The lining at the bottom had torn from the impact. Through the rip, something metal was glinting. "There is something inside the lining," Lena said, frowning. She reached in and pulled out a small, flat tin box. It looked like an old biscuit tin, rusted at the edges. My heart hammered against my ribs. I rolled closer. "Give it to me." Lena handed me the box. It was cold to the touch. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get a grip on the lid. I pried it open. Inside, resting on a bed of yellowed cotton, was a single card. It was silver, heavy, and made of metal, not plastic. It was scratched and worn, as if it had been carried in a wallet for 50 years. On the front, embossed in simple black letters, were the words, "Summit Heritage Bank." Below that, the words, "Legacy Access." Underneath the card was a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was jagged, written with a shaky hand, but I recognized the loop of the L and the sharp cross of the T. It was Grandpa's writing. I unfolded the note. There were no pleasantries, no "Dear Monica," just one sentence, written in black ink that had started to fade. "Only use this when they show you who they really are." I read the words again and again. The silence in the room was heavy, charged with a sudden, electric tension. "What is it?" Lena asked, leaning over my shoulder. "Is it a savings bond?" I ran my thumb over the silver card. It felt warm now, vibrating slightly against my skin. My parents had kicked me out. They had abandoned me in a hospital. They had blocked my lawsuit. They had tried to buy my silence for $50,000. They had shown me, with absolute clarity, exactly who they were. "No," I said, my voice steady for the first time in months. "It is not a bond." I looked up at Lena, and though my legs were dead, I felt something stir in my chest, a spark, a flame. "It is an answer." The metal card felt unnaturally cool against my skin, like a piece of ice that refused to melt. I sat in my wheelchair under the harsh light of Lena's kitchen, turning the object over and over in my fingers. It was heavy, heavier than any credit card I had ever held. The silver plating was scratched, a web of tiny abrasions that told a story of decades spent in a wallet, rubbing against coins and keys. But the embossed letters were still sharp, raised and defiant against the wear. "Legacy Access." I ran my thumb over the words, and suddenly, the smell of stale apartment air and cardboard boxes vanished. I was replaced by the antiseptic sting of a hospital room in Larkspur, 5 years ago. I was 27 then. I had just landed the job at Northwind Dynamics, flush with the arrogance of a young woman who thought she had mapped out her entire life. Grandpa Walter was fading. The cancer had eaten away at his frame until he looked less like the lumberjack of my childhood and more like a fragile bird made of paper and bone. "Come here, Moneybug," he had whispered, his voice rattling in his chest. I had sat on the edge of his bed, holding his hand. His skin felt like dry parchment. With a trembling effort, he had reached under his pillow and pulled out this card. "Take this," he said, pressing it into my palm. His grip was surprisingly strong for a dying man. "What is it, Grandpa?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your debit card? You need this for your bills." "My bills are done," he coughed, a dry hacking sound. "This is for you. But listen to me. This is not for a down payment on a condo. It is not for a vacation to Italy. It is a parachute." I had smiled sadly, thinking he was delirious. Grandpa lived in a 2-bedroom cottage and drove a truck that was older than I was. I assumed the account held a few $1,000s. Maybe his life savings from the hardware store he used to run. "If a day comes when you hit the bottom," he continued, his blue eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that frightened me. "I mean the real bottom. Monica, when the world breaks you, when you have nowhere to turn, you go to Summit Heritage Bank. You show them this. They will know what to do." "I promise," I had said, mostly to soothe him. I slipped the card into my pocket, thinking I would never use it. I was a Blake, after all. Even if I was estranged from my parents' business, I had their resilience. I had my degree. I had my career. I did not need a safety net from a man who clipped coupons to save 50 cents on coffee. How arrogant I had been. The memory shifted, pulling me further back. I was 10 years old. The air smelled of pine needles and wood smoke. We were sitting on the back porch of his cabin, the Colorado night vast and star-studded above us. A small fire crackled in the fire pit, and we were eating sweet potatoes wrapped in foil, roasted directly in the coals. My parents never ate with their hands. Dinner at home was a silent affair of silverware clinking on china, but here, with ash on my fingers and the sweetness of the potato on my tongue, I felt alive. "Your daddy called today," Grandpa said, poking the fire with a stick. "He made a big deal about a new merger, said he crushed the competition." "Dad says winning is the only thing that matters," I said, repeating the mantra I heard every morning over breakfast. Grandpa shook his head slowly. "Your dad and Mom, they think money is the destination. They chase it like a dog chases a car. They do not know what they would do if they actually caught it." He looked at me, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "Money is not the goal. Monica, it is a tool. It is a hammer. In the hands of a builder, it creates shelter. In the hands of a fool, it breaks windows. If you ever have it, really have it, you remember that. You use it to build, or you use it to protect. You never use it to destroy just for the sake of winning." "I will never have as much money as Dad," I said innocently. Grandpa had chuckled then, a low, rumbled sound. "You never know, kiddo. Life is long, and the tortoise beats the hare because the hare gets distracted by his own reflection." "Monica?" Lena's voice snapped me back to the present. The firelight was gone, replaced by the flickering bulb of the kitchenette. "It is probably just an old savings account," Lena said, eyeing the card with skepticism. She was trying to protect me. I knew. She did not want me to get my hopes up only to find out there was $50 and some accrued interest waiting for me. Maybe enough for a month's rent? That would be good, right? "Grandpa was not a liar," I said softly. "He said it was a parachute. He wouldn't call $50 a parachute. People get weird when they are dying. Mon, they exaggerate." "I have to check," I said. "I have to know." I turned the card over. There was a toll-free number printed on the back in small, fading text. Below it was a sequence of numbers that I assumed was the account ID. I put my phone on speaker. My hand was shaking as I dialed. The line rang once, twice, then an automated voice answered. "Welcome to Summit Heritage Bank. For personal banking, press 1. For business banking, press 2. I pressed 0. Please hold for the next available representative, the voice said. The hold music was a generic classical piece, tinny and distorted. After 2 minutes, a woman answered. She sounded bored, the kind of fatigue that comes from answering 300 calls a day about overdraft fees. Summit Heritage, this is Brenda. How can I help you? Hi, I said, my voice cracking. I cleared my throat. I found an old card belonging to my grandfather. I believe I am the beneficiary. I wanted to check the status of the account. Okay, Brenda sighed. Read me the account number. It is 880, I began, reading the raised digits. 41977, and then just the letter A. There was a pause on the line. The sound of typing stopped abruptly. Did you say 77A? Brenda asked. Her voice had lost its boredom. It was sharper now. Yes, 77A. Hold on, she said. The line went silent. No hold music. Just a dead, heavy silence that made my heart hammer against my ribs. Lena looked at me, her eyebrows raised. That is weird. A moment later, the line clicked back. Miss Blake? It was not Brenda. It was a man's voice this time. Smooth, polished, and unmistakably alert. Yes, I said. My name is Arthur Penhaligon, from the Legacy Client Department. I have your file here. We have been waiting for this call for quite some time. Lena's jaw dropped. I felt a chill run down my spine. Waiting for this call? Grandpa had been dead for 5 years. I would like to check the balance, I stammered. I cannot disclose account details over the phone for a legacy access holder, the man said. His tone was respectful, deferential even. It was the tone people used for my mother, not for me. However, I see you are located in Denver. The main branch on 17th Street can accommodate you. Would tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock work for a consultation? Yes, I breathed. 9 is fine. Excellent. Bring the card and 2 forms of identification. Ask for Richard Hale. He is the branch manager. He will be expecting you. The line went dead. I looked at Lena. She was staring at the phone as if it had just turned into a snake. Legacy Client Department? She whispered. Monica, regular people do not get transferred to a Legacy Client Department. What did your grandpa do? Did he rob a train? He owned a hardware store, I said, my mind racing. And he fixed watches on the weekends. Hardware stores do not get you private meetings with branch managers, Lena said, a slow grin spreading across her face. Oh my God, what if it is, like, $100,000? We could pay off the medical bills. We could get you a better apartment. Or, I said, the fear creeping in, it is a special account for seniors that has $10 left in it, and they just have a fancy name for it to make them feel important. Don't be a buzzkill, Lena said, grabbing her laptop. I am booking a ride. We are going in style. But we did not go in style. The next morning, reality crashed back in. We could not afford a wheelchair-accessible van service. They wanted $150 for a round trip. Uber was not an option because my chair did not fit in a standard trunk. So we rented a U-Haul. It was a $19 a day box truck, the kind people use to move cheap furniture. Lena drove, and I sat in the passenger seat, my wheelchair strapped into the back cargo hold with bungee cords. It was a humiliating spectacle. 2 women, dressed in the only professional clothes we had left. Lena in a blazer she borrowed from me, and me in a skirt that hid the atrophy of my legs, climbing out of a moving truck in front of a bank that looked like a temple to capitalism. The night before, I had hardly slept. I lay in bed, clutching the silver card to my chest. I played the voicemails again, not the one from the hospital, but older ones. There was a recording I had made when I was in college, interviewing him for an oral history project. I plugged in my headphones and listened to his voice in the dark. The thing about power, Monica, his voice crackled through the static, is that it is quiet. The loud ones, the ones screaming, "Look at me," they are just insecure. True power sits in the back of the room and waits. When people look down on you, step back, observe, Do not react. Let them show their hand. And when the time is right, you play yours. I had closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me. Step back. Observe. I pulled up Google Maps on my phone and looked at the Summit Heritage Bank building. It was a glass monolith in the financial district, reflecting the mountains and the sky. It looked impenetrable. It looked like the kind of place my father walked into without knocking, and the kind of place security guards usually chased me away from. I zoomed in on the street view. I saw people in suits rushing by, oblivious. I wondered if any of them knew that inside that building, a dead man from a small town had left a time bomb. Or maybe it was a life raft. I still did not know which. Morning came with a gray steel light. The ride to the bank was silent. Lena focused on navigating the bulky truck through downtown traffic. I focused on breathing. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of pain through my spine, a reminder of my fragility. We parked the truck 2 blocks away to avoid the valet. Lena retrieved my chair from the back, unfolding it on the sidewalk. She helped me transfer. Her movements practiced and efficient, ignoring the stares of a businessman talking on his Bluetooth headset nearby. "Ready?" Lena asked, smoothing down her blazer. She looked fierce, like a bodyguard protecting a diplomat. "Ready as I will ever be," I said. She pushed me toward the entrance. The revolving doors were too narrow for the chair, so we had to use the side door. The security guard watched us with suspicion until I held up my ID. He buzzed us in. The lobby was vast. The ceiling soared 30 feet high, supported by pillars of marble. The air smelled of money, that distinct mix of crisp paper, floor wax, and expensive cologne. My wheelchair squeaked on the pristine floor, the sound echoing sharply. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It was the sound of not belonging. We approached the main teller counter. There was no line. A young woman with heavy eyeliner sat behind the glass. She was looking at her fingernails, bored out of her mind. As we approached, she covered her mouth with her hand, suppressing a massive yawn. She looked at us, 2 women coming out of the rain, one in a wheelchair, looking disheveled and out of place in this cathedral of wealth. Her eyes flicked to Lena's scuffed shoes, then to my dead legs. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice dragging. She did not smile. She clearly wanted us to ask for change or directions so she could dismiss us. I took a deep breath. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the silver card. "I have an appointment," I said, my voice ringing clearer than I expected in the cavernous space. "With Richard Hale." I slid the card under the glass partition. The teller sighed, annoyed at the interruption of her morning lethargy. She picked up the card lazily, barely glancing at it. "Do you have an account number or—" Her voice trailed off. She had turned the card over. Her eyes locked onto the magnetic strip, then the embossed words on the front. She froze. The yawn died in her throat. Her eyes widened, snapping from the card to me, then back to the card. She typed something into her computer. Her fingers were moving fast now. A moment later, she stopped, her face drained of color. She looked up at me, and the boredom was gone. It was replaced by a sudden, frantic energy. "Please wait here," she stammered. She stood up so quickly her chair knocked into the wall behind her. "Just do not move. I will get Mr. Hale, right now." She practically ran from the counter, disappearing through a door marked private. I looked at Lena. Lena looked at me. Her grip on my wheelchair handles tightened. "Okay," Lena whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and terror. "I do not think there is just $50 in that account." I looked at the empty counter where the card still lay. It looked so small against the dark granite. "Step back, observe." I sat in the silence, listening to the hum of the air conditioning, and waited for the world to turn upside down. The silence that followed the teller's departure was thick enough to choke on. The air in the bank lobby seemed to shift, heavy with sudden, unspoken tension. I sat in my wheelchair, my hands gripping the armrests, feeling the cold seep into my bones from the wet pavement outside. 2 security guards who had been chatting near the revolving doors suddenly straightened up. They did not look at me with the usual suspicion reserved for loiterers or solicitors. Instead, they positioned themselves at the perimeter of the area where Lena and I were waiting, their eyes scanning the room with renewed intensity. It was a subtle change, but I noticed it. We had gone from being nuisances to being assets under protection. "Monica," Lena whispered, leaning down close to my ear. "Why are the guards staring at us like we are carrying nuclear codes?" "I do not know," I murmured back. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A door behind the teller counter burst open. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out. He was tall, silver-haired, and moved with a kind of urgent precision that commanded immediate attention. This was Richard Hale. I recognized him from the website photo I had stared at the night before, though in person, he looked paler, his composure tightly wound. He did not walk. He marched straight toward us, ignoring the line of customers that had begun to form. When he reached my wheelchair, he stopped and bowed his head slightly, a gesture of deference that felt bizarrely out of place in modern America. "Ms. Blake," he said. His voice was low, controlled, but there was a tremor in it that he could not quite mask. "I am Richard Hale, the branch manager. Please, follow me." He gestured toward a set of double-frosted glass doors at the far end of the lobby. "We have a U-Haul parked 2 blocks away," Lena blurted out, her nerves getting the better of her. "We might get a ticket." Richard turned to one of the security guards. "Jensen, locate the vehicle and ensure it is taken care of. Pay any fines. Just make sure it is secure." "Yes, sir," the guard said, touching his earpiece. Lena's mouth fell open. Richard ushered us through the lobby. I felt the eyes of every teller and customer on us as we passed. We were no longer the crippled woman and her friend in muddy shoes. We were the center of a gravity well I did not yet understand. The VIP room was a sanctuary of silence. As soon as the heavy glass doors hissed shut behind us, the noise of the bank vanished. The carpet here was plush, swallowing the sound of my wheels. Richard gestured for us to position ourselves near a mahogany desk that looked like it cost more than my entire college education. He went behind the desk and typed a command into his computer. A soft hum filled the room, and the frosted glass walls turned completely opaque, sealing us off from the world. "Ms. Blake," Richard said, sitting down and clasping his hands in front of him. "Before we proceed, I must complete the Level 5 identity verification protocols. This is a requirement of the trust established by Mr. Walter Hayes." "Level 5?" I asked. "I brought my driver's license." "That will not be necessary for this tier," Richard said. He pressed a button on his desk. "The trust requires a voice print match and a mnemonic key." A speaker on the desk crackled to life. My breath hitched. It was Grandpa's voice. "If you are listening to this, then I am gone, and the girl is ready. State your name, child." The recording was old, the audio slightly grainy, but it was him. Tears pricked my eyes. It felt like a ghost had walked into the room. "Monica Elaine Blake," I said, my voice shaking. A green light flashed on Richard's console. "Voice print confirmed with 99% accuracy," he stated. "Now, the mnemonic key. Your grandfather set a 6-digit PIN code. He noted in the file that he taught it to you during a fishing trip to Blue River when you were 12. He called it the coordinates of the hidden treasure." I closed my eyes. I remembered that trip. The sun on the water, the smell of trout, Grandpa tapping my forehead, making me repeat the numbers until I could say them backwards. "It is not a treasure map. Moneybug, it is a key. Keep it in your head, not on paper." 7, I whispered. 2, 9, 4, 1, 8. Richard typed the numbers as I spoke them. Click, click, click. The screen on his desk flashed. He let out a long breath, as if he had been holding it for 5 minutes. He looked at me, and his expression softened from professional anxiety to something approaching awe. "Identity verified," he said quietly. "Welcome, Ms. Blake." He reached out and slowly rotated the large monitor so it faced me. "Please," he said. "Look." I stared at the screen. It was a portfolio dashboard. Clean and minimalist. At the top, in bold black numbers, was the total asset value. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. $1,200,000,000. The room seemed to tilt. My hands went numb. I could hear Lena gasping beside me, a sharp intake of air that sounded like a hiccup. "This," I choked out, "this is impossible. My grandfather was a hardware store owner. He lived in a cabin. He clipped coupons." "Walter Hayes was a man of extraordinary discipline," Richard said, his voice reverent. "He was one of the earliest silent investors in Colorado's tech boom in the 80s. He bought land when everyone else was selling. He accumulated wealth quietly, aggressively, and without ego. He never spent it. He simply let it grow." I scanned the list of assets scrolling down the screen: municipal bonds, gold reserves, commercial real estate in downtown Denver, blue-chip stocks. But then my eyes landed on the line item that made up the bulk of the portfolio. It was highlighted in blue: Blake Urban Holdings, Class A preferred shares, 51% equity. My heart stopped. I mean, it literally felt like it stopped beating for a full second. "Blake Urban Holdings?" I whispered. "My parents' company?" "Your company," Richard corrected gently. "I do not understand," I said, looking up at him, feeling dizzy. "My father founded that company. He built it." "Your father managed it," Richard said. "But 30 years ago, Gregory Blake made a series of disastrous investments that nearly bankrupted the firm. He was days away from liquidation. He went to every bank in the city, and they all turned him down." Richard leaned forward. "Except one man. Your grandfather stepped in. He bought the debt. He recapitalized the company, but he had conditions. He took a controlling interest, 51%, but he signed a silent partner agreement. He allowed your father to retain the title of CEO and the public image of ownership. Your father gets the credit, the magazine covers, and the salary. But the controlling shares? They have always belonged to Walter Hayes." I sat there, stunned into silence. My entire life, the dinners where my father bragged about his business acumen, the lectures on success, the arrogance, it was all a lie. He was an employee, my grandfather. The man they mocked for wearing flannel shirts and driving a rusted truck had been their boss for 3 decades. "Why?" I asked. "Why didn't Grandpa tell anyone?" "He wanted to protect you," Richard said. He stood up and walked to a wall safe behind his desk. He punched in a code and the heavy steel door swung open. He pulled out a thick leather binder and a small flash drive. "He knew that if you grew up knowing you were an heiress to a billion-dollar fortune, it might ruin you," Richard explained, placing the items on the desk in front of me. "He wanted you to build your own character, but he also knew your parents. He knew that one day, their greed might turn against you." He tapped the leather binder. "This is the trust mandate. It stipulates that upon his death, the shares transfer to a blind trust. But if you, the beneficiary, present the silver card, the trust dissolves, and full control of the assets, including the 51% stake in Blake Urban Holdings, transfers directly to you." I looked at the binder. My parents had kicked me out of their house because I was a liability. They had sneered at my poverty, and all this time, I held the deed to their throne in a tin box. "There is one more thing," Richard said. His voice grew harder, colder. "Something your grandfather instructed me to investigate and keep sealed until you arrived." He opened the binder to a section marked with a red tab. He pulled out a document and slid it across the desk. It was a contract. The header read, "Logistics Service Agreement." "You were in an accident involving a truck from Silver Ridge Logistics," Richard said. I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes." "Your father, Gregory Blake, personally authorized the contract with Silver Ridge Logistics 6 months ago," Richard said, pointing to a signature at the bottom of the page. "His internal safety compliance officer advised against it. Silver Ridge had a history of brake failures and driver fatigue violations, but they were 30% cheaper than the competitor." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. "He knew?" I whispered. "He knew they were dangerous?" "He was warned," Richard confirmed. He signed a waiver to bypass the safety audit. He chose the savings over the safety standards. That decision saved the company $200,000 this quarter. $200,000. That was the price of Ethan's life. That was the price of my legs. My father had not just abandoned me after the accident. He had set the stage for it. He had signed the paper that put that truck on the road, all to save a fraction of a percent on a spreadsheet. A sound escaped me, a low, guttural sob that was half laugh, half scream. Lena reached out and grabbed my hand, squeezing it so hard her fingernails dug into my skin. "Oh my God, Monica," she whispered. "He killed him. Basically, he killed him." I looked down at the document. Gregory Blake's signature was scrawled in blue ink, arrogant and sweeping. I thought of him standing in the drawing room, telling me that my life was the sum of my choices. You chose to drive in the rain. No, he chose money. I looked up at Richard. The fear I had seen in his eyes earlier was gone. Now, he was looking at me with expectancy. He was a banker, a man who understood power dynamics better than anyone. He knew the tectonic plates had just shifted. "Ms. Blake," Richard said, his voice quiet but intense. "You are now the majority shareholder of Blake Urban Holdings. You own the debt. You own the equity. You can call a board meeting tomorrow. You can dissolve the board. You can fire the CEO." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. "From this moment forward, the question is not what the bank can do for you. The question is, what do you want to do with them?" I looked at the screen again. $1,200,000,000. I looked at the contract that proved my father's negligence. I looked at my paralyzed legs, useless in the chair. For months, I had been drowning. I had been begging for scraps. I had been the poor, disabled daughter who was an inconvenience to her successful parents. I took a deep breath. The air in the room felt crisp, energized. I reached out and placed my hand on the leather binder. I felt the cool texture of the cover. It felt like armor. I looked at Richard, and for the first time since the headlights blinded me on that rainy highway, my eyes were dry. The despair was gone. It had been burned away by a cold, white-hot clarity. "I do not want to just fire them, Richard," I said softly. I looked at the silver card sitting on the desk. "Only use this when they show you who they really are. I want them to know exactly who I am." We sat in the cab of the rental truck, the engine idling with a rough, shuddering vibration that rattled my teeth. The rain had stopped, leaving the Denver streets slick and reflective, mirroring the steel-gray sky. Lena was gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white, staring straight ahead at the bumper of a parked sedan. "So," she said, her voice sounding thin, like it might snap. "We are billionaires. Technically." "Technically," I echoed. I looked down at my lap. The leather binder Richard had given me was heavy, a physical anchor in a world that had suddenly lost its gravity. "Well, the trust is, but I control the trust." Lena let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She turned to me, mascara running down her cheeks, her eyes wild. "We drove here in a $19 a day moving truck. Monica, I have $40 in my checking account, and you just own half the city." "I own more than that," I whispered. I looked at the Summit Heritage Building towering above us. "I own them. My parents. I own them." We started laughing then. It was a hysterical, terrifying release. We laughed until tears streamed down our faces, until our ribs ached, until the absurdity of the universe collapsed in on us. We were two broken women in a dirty truck, holding the keys to an empire. That night, back in the apartment that smelled of packing tape and despair, I watched the final video file Richard had unlocked for me. My grandfather filled the screen. He was sitting on a wooden stool in his workshop, surrounded by sawdust and half-finished birdhouses. He looked healthier here than in my memories of his final days, his eyes sharp and blue. "Monica," he began, looking directly into the lens, "if you are seeing this, it means you used the card. It means Gregory and Lorraine failed you. I am sorry for that. I truly am." He picked up a piece of sandpaper and began smoothing a block of wood. A nervous habit I remembered well. You probably wonder why I hid it, why I lived like a pauper when I could have bought the whole town of Larkspur. He blew the dust off the wood. Money is like salt water, kiddo. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. I saw what it did to your mother. I saw what it did to Gregory. They started thinking they were better than other people because their bank account had more zeros. I did not want that for you. He leaned forward, his face filling the frame. I wanted you to build your own muscles. I wanted you to know what it feels like to work for $1. Because the person who inherits power without earning it is a tyrant, but the person who knows what it is to be powerless, that person becomes a leader. His expression hardened. Now, listen to me. You have the weapon now. You have the control, but do not use it yet. Do not go in there tomorrow and fire them in a fit of rage. Rage burns out. Justice is cold. He pointed a calloused finger at the camera. Build yourself first. Fix your life. Get strong. Let them think they have won. Let them get comfortable. And when you are ready, truly ready, you make them face the mirror. You make them see that the empire they worship was never really theirs. The screen went black. I sat in the dark, the silence of the room wrapping around me. Build yourself first. I did not sleep that night. I spent it planning. 3 days later, we moved. I did not buy a mansion. I did not buy a penthouse in the sky. I bought a sprawling, single-story ranch house in Cherry Hills Village, south of Denver. It was expensive, yes, but not ostentatious. It was practical. I paid in cash. The house had wide hallways, zero-threshold showers, and polished concrete floors that made gliding in my chair effortless. For the first time since the accident, I could move from room to room without asking for help. I could shower without terror. I could cook in a kitchen with lowered countertops. You are moving in, I told Lena as we stood in the empty living room, the sunlight pouring in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I cannot, she protested, though her eyes were wide. This place it is too much. You are not a guest, I said firmly. You are my partner. I need you. And besides, I am hiring you. I need a director of operations for my new venture, and the salary is triple whatever you are making at the diner. She started to cry again, but this time, it was different. It was the relief of a soldier being told the war was over. But my war was just beginning. I dedicated the entire east wing of the house to my reconstruction. I hired Dr. Evans, the top neurorehabilitation specialist in the state, offering him a retainer that made him clear his schedule. We converted the garage into a state-of-the-art gym. We installed a heated hydrotherapy pool in the backyard. The work was brutal. Again, Dr. Evans would say, standing over me as I lay on the mat, sweat stinging my eyes. Fire the glutes, find the connection. It was not a movie montage. There was no inspiring music. There was only pain. It was hours of gritting my teeth, of screaming into a towel, of my muscles spasming and trembling. It was the humiliation of wetting myself because my bladder control was still spotty, and the grit to clean it up and get back on the table. Money could not buy nerve regeneration, but it bought me time. It bought me the best technology. The electrical stimulation suits, the exoskeleton trainers. It bought me the chance to fight. I am not doing this to walk to the mailbox, I told Dr. Evans one afternoon, my body shaking from exhaustion. I am doing this because when I face them, I want to be standing. While my body fought its battle, my mind opened a second front. I launched Second Wind Solutions. It was a boutique consultancy firm focused on digital transformation for small businesses, the kind of companies my parents would sneeze at. I funded it with a fraction of the capital available to me. I did not want to be a billionaire playing business. I wanted to work. I hired a small team of developers and analysts. We worked out of a rented loft in the Arts District, not a glass tower. I rolled into meetings, pitched clients, and closed deals. I introduced myself as Monica Blake, period. Not the heiress, not the victim, just Monica. Every contract we signed, every problem we solved, rebuilt a piece of my shattered confidence. I was remembering who I was before the truck. I was sharp. I was capable. I was dangerous. But the real danger was happening in the shadows. I hired a law firm from Chicago, Archer and Sloan. They were aggressive, expensive, and completely unconnected to the incestuous legal circles of Denver. I did not want anyone at the country club tipping off my father. "We need to move the shares," I told David Archer, the lead attorney, during a secure video call. "I want the 51% stake in Blake Urban Holdings transferred from the Hayes Trust to a series of holding companies, shells within shells. I want full control, but I want my name invisible." "We can structure it as a blind LLC chain," David said, taking notes. "It will look like an institutional investors consolidating the position. Your parents will see the activity, but they won't know the source." "Good," I said. "Let them get paranoid. Let them wonder who is buying up their debt." "And the other matter?" David asked. "The trucking company?" "Open it all up," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "I do not want a settlement. I want a forensic audit of Silver Ridge Logistics. I want the maintenance logs, the driver schedules, the internal emails, and specifically, I want the procurement communications between Silver Ridge and Blake Urban Holdings. That is going to be a declaration of war. Monica," David warned, "if we file for discovery on that scale, your father's lawyers will come out swinging." "Let them swing," I said. "I have the document Grandpa left in the safe. I know my father signed the waiver. I am not fishing for evidence. David, I already have the smoking gun. I just need you to build the courtroom around it." Weeks turned into months. My life became a rhythm of pain and progress. Morning was 3 hours of therapy. Afternoon was second wind. Evening was reviewing the legal briefs that David sent over, dossiers of my parents' corruption, their corner-cutting, their arrogance. I watched them from afar. I set up Google alerts for their names. I saw photos of them at galas, smiling their practiced smiles, holding champagne flutes. They looked happy. They looked relieved. They thought the problem of their disabled daughter had been flushed away, disappearing into the drain of poverty and obscurity. They had no idea that the shark was not only in the water, but it owned the ocean. One evening, 6 months after the bank visit, I was in the home gym. It was late. The house was quiet. Lena had gone out on a date, her first in years. I was standing between the parallel bars. I was wearing the leg braces, heavy carbon fiber supports that locked my knees. My hands gripped the steel bars, my knuckles white. "Come on," I whispered to myself. Sweat dripped off my nose, landing on the rubber mat. I shifted my weight. I engaged my core. I sent the signal down the damaged pathways of my spine, screaming at the nerves to wake up, to obey. Lift. My right foot dragged. It scraped against the floor. But then, it lifted. An inch, maybe 2. I swung it forward. I planted the heel. I shifted my weight. My left foot followed. It was ugly. It was slow. It looked like a marionette being worked by a drunk puppeteer. But I was upright. I was moving. I took 3 steps, 4. At the end of the bars, I collapsed into my wheelchair, gasping for air, my heart pounding like a sledgehammer. My legs were on fire with nerve pain, but I started to laugh. It was a breathless, triumphant sound. I wheeled myself over to the wall where I had framed the silver card. It sat inside a simple black shadow box, the scratched metal catching the light of the gym. I looked at the inscription, Legacy Access. I wiped the sweat from my forehead. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the frame. The woman looking back was not the same person who had shivered in the rain outside the Blake mansion. Her eyes were different. They were harder. They were patient. "I am coming for you," I whispered to the empty room. I looked at the card, then down at my trembling legs. "You thought you broke me," I said, my voice steadying into a vow. "But you just cleared the construction site." I reached up and touched the glass. "I am not just going to survive you, Dad. I am not just going to survive you, Mom." I pulled my hand back into a fist. "I am going to win." It started quietly. the way avalanches often do, a loose stone, a shift in the wind, and then the mountain comes down. For me, the loose stone was a journalist named Sarah Jenkins. She wrote for a local Denver business blog, usually covering zoning disputes or restaurant openings. She had heard about Second Wind Solutions, my boutique consultancy firm that was making waves by helping small family-owned businesses modernize their tech stacks for a fraction of the corporate rate. She wanted to do a profile on me. I agreed, on one condition: no questions about my family history. I wanted the story to be about the work, about the recovery, about the fact that a woman in a wheelchair was outperforming the heavy hitters in the district. The article ran on a Tuesday morning with the headline, "The Woman Who Refused to Stay Down." It featured a photo Lena had taken of me in the home gym. I was standing between the parallel bars, sweat on my forehead, my knuckles white as I gripped the steel. Wearing my leg braces, I looked exhausted, unglamorous, and undeniably fierce. By noon, the article had 500 shares. By dinner, it had 5,000. By the next morning, it was trending nationally. The narrative struck a nerve. America loves a comeback story, especially one involving a tragic accident and a grit-toothed refusal to give up. The emails started pouring in: investors, clients, and then the media. 2 days later, I was sitting in a studio in downtown Denver, doing a remote interview for a national morning news program. The host, a woman with perfect teeth and a sympathetic tilt to her head, leaned into the camera. "Monica," she said, her voice dripping with compassion, "your story is incredible. You lost your fiancé, your ability to walk, and your job in the span of a week. Most people would have crumbled. You must have had an incredible support system. Tell us about your family. How did they help you get through this?" I looked directly into the camera lens. I thought of the night in the rain outside the iron gates. I thought of the $50 settlement offer. I thought of Gregory and Lorraine sipping wine while I learned how to use a catheter. "I did not have a support system," I said. My voice was calm, steady. "My parents made it very clear that my disability was a liability they could not afford to be associated with. They asked me to leave their home because my wheelchair did not fit the aesthetic of their success. I survived because of a friend, a stranger who became a sister, and the memory of my grandfather." The host looked stunned. The producers had clearly expected a heartwarming story about family unity. They asked you to leave?" she stammered. "They kicked me out," I corrected. "But I do not want to talk about them. I want to talk about Second Wind. I want to talk about how we define worth in this country, not by who stands by us, but by how we stand up for ourselves." The interview ended, but the internet was just getting started. I had never mentioned the name Blake. I had never identified my parents. But the internet is a hive mind of detectives with too much time and a hunger for justice. Within 4 hours, a Reddit thread had identified me. They cross-referenced my name, my previous employment at Northwind Dynamics, and the date of the accident. They found the obituary for Ethan Ward, and then they found the connection to Blake Urban Holdings. The comments section became a bonfire. "Wait, is she Gregory Blake's daughter? The real estate mogul?" I looked it up. She is Monica Blake. Her dad is the CEO of Blake Urban. Then came the smoking gun. A user with the handle Nightingale Shift 52 posted a comment that got pinned to the top of the thread. "I was a nurse in the ICU at Denver Health the week she was brought in. I remember her. She was alone the entire time except for one friend. We called the parents 3 times for consent forms. The mother said she was in Miami and could not be disturbed during closing hours. They never visited, not once." The public sentiment shifted instantly from inspiration to outrage. The hashtag Boycott Blake began to trend on Twitter. People were sharing photos of Gregory and Lorraine at galas, captioning them with quotes from my interview. While the court of public opinion was burning down their reputation, the market was burning down their net worth. The commercial real estate sector was in a freefall. Interest rates had hiked 3 times in the last quarter, making the massive loans Blake Urban Holdings used to finance their skyscrapers incredibly expensive to service. Tenants were breaking leases. Vacancy rates in their crown jewel properties were hitting 40%. And then there were the whispers. My lawyers at Archer and Sloan had been busy. We had been aggressively buying up Blake Urban debt on the secondary market. Every time a bank looked to offload a risky loan associated with my father's company, we bought it. We were also quietly accumulating Class B shares, the non-voting stock that still held equity weight. Inside the glass tower of Blake Urban Holdings, panic was setting in. I had a source inside the building, a junior analyst named Kevin who had been passed over for a promotion by my father 3 times. I had hired him as a consultant for Second Wind, and in exchange, he kept me updated on the mood in the C-suite. "They are freaking out," Kevin told me over an encrypted call. "Gregory is screaming at everyone. There is a rumor that a single entity is consolidating the debt. They keep seeing the name Hayes Legacy Trust on the transfer documents." "Does he know it is me?" I asked. "He does not believe it," Kevin said, laughing darkly. "Someone in legal brought it up. They said, 'Hayes, isn't that your late father-in-law?' Gregory waved it off. He said, 'That old man died with pennies. It must be a coincidence, probably some hedge fund using a generic name. He is in total denial. Monica, he thinks you are living in a shelter somewhere.' He was wrong. I was living in a house paid for with cash, watching his empire crumble on a 50-inch screen. Then the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was a number I had deleted but never forgotten. Mom. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. I put it on speaker so Lena could hear. "Hello?" I said. "Monica!" Lorraine's voice came through, shrill and breathless. "Oh, thank God I got through. We have been so worried about you, darling." I sat in my office chair, staring at the swimming pool outside where I had spent 2 hours that morning learning to walk underwater. "Worried," I repeated flatly. "It has been 8 months, Mom." I know, she said, her voice dipping into a performative sadness. "Time just flies, does it not? Business has been crazy, but we saw the article, that nice piece about your little computer business. We are so proud of you." "My little computer business," I echoed. "Is that why you called? To tell me you are proud?" "Well, that," she paused, and I could hear the hesitation. "And, well, we miss you. Your father was just saying yesterday that the house feels so empty. We were thinking, maybe we could have dinner? A family reconciliation? We could send a car for you." I closed my eyes. It was so transparent it was insulting. They were bleeding money. Their reputation was in the toilet. They needed a photo op. They needed to parade the beloved disabled daughter in front of the cameras to kill the bad press and reassure the investors that the Blake family was united and stable. "You need money, don't you?" I asked. The silence on the other end was deafening. "Excuse me?" Lorraine sounded offended. "The stock is down 60%, I said, reciting the numbers I had memorized that morning. "The bond rating was downgraded to junk status yesterday. You have a liquidity crisis. You need to show the banks that you are stable. So you want to bring me back into the fold. It is a PR move." "How dare you?" Lorraine snapped, the mask slipping instantly. "We are your parents. We gave you life. We are offering you a chance to come home, to be taken care of." "I am already taken care of," I cut her off. "I have a home. I have a career. And I have people who actually love me. I do not need you." "Monica, listen to me." Gregory's voice suddenly boomed on the line. He must have been listening on the extension. "You are playing a dangerous game. The press is fickle. If you think you can slander this family and get away with it, you are mistaken. We have hired a crisis management firm. We control the narrative." "You kicked me out in the rain, Dad," I said, my voice cold as ice. "There is no narrative that fixes that." "You ungrateful little—" I ended the call. I sat there for a moment, my heart rate steady. 6 months ago, that call would have broken me. Today, it felt like nothing more than swatting away a fly. "They are going to fight dirty," Lena said from the doorway. She was holding a tablet. "They just released a statement to the Denver Post. It says they tried to help you, but you refuse treatment due to mental instability caused by grief. They are painting you as crazy. Monica. Let them try, I said. But before their PR firm could launch the full smear campaign, the hammer dropped. The next morning, my phone rang again. It was Richard Hale from Summit Heritage Bank. Ms. Blake, Richard said. His voice was urgent. We have a situation. What is it? Your father just attempted to draw down the emergency line of credit for Blake Urban Holdings. He is trying to meet payroll and cover the interest payments on the downtown tower. Did you approve it? I froze it, Richard said. As the representative of the majority shareholder, I have flagged the transaction as high risk given the current leadership instability. I smiled. Good. There is more, Richard continued. Because of the freeze and the credit downgrade, the bank's risk committee has invoked the material adverse change clause in the master lending agreement. We are calling the loans, Monica, all of them. What does that mean for them? It means they have 48 hours to pay back $300 million, or the bank takes the company. We have scheduled an emergency restructuring meeting for tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. The board will be there. Your parents will be there. And as the majority owner of the debt and the equity, the Hayes Legacy Trust must be represented. Richard paused. I can attend as your proxy, he said gently. You can stay anonymous. We can execute the takeover. Remove them from the board, and you never have to see them. You can own the company from the shadows. I looked down at my legs. I looked at the braces strapped to my calves. For months, I had been the girl in the shadows. I had been the silent victim, the tragedy, the little computer business owner. I had hidden behind the name of a dead man's trust because I was afraid of the confrontation. But Grandpa Walter had not left me the card so I could hide. Only use this when they show you who they really are. They had shown me. Now it was my turn. No, I said to Richard. I do not want a proxy. Are you sure? Richard asked. It will be hostile. They will be cornered. I am sure, I said. I will be there at 10 o'clock. Very well. Shall I arrange for the service elevator? It opens directly into the boardroom for easier wheelchair access. I looked across the room at the walker standing in the corner. It was titanium, lightweight, and sturdy. I had walked 50 feet with it yesterday. It was agonizing. It was slow, but it was upright. No service elevator, I said. I will come through the front door. Ms. Blake? Richard hesitated. The boardroom is at the end of a very long corridor. Then tell them to wait, I said. I am done rushing for people who never waited for me. I hung up the phone. I turned to Lena. She was looking at me with wide eyes. We are going to the meeting, I said. Okay, she nodded, a fierce grin spreading across her face. What are you going to wear? Something expensive, I said. And bring the file, the Silver Ridge file. I want everything on the table. You are going to destroy them, Lena whispered. No, I said, looking at the silver card in its frame. I am just going to introduce them to the boss. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Summit Heritage Bank headquarters was a masterpiece of intimidation. It was a glass box suspended in the sky, offering a panoramic view of the Rockies. But inside, the air was pressurized and cold. A long table made of black obsidian stretched down the center, flanked by 20 leather chairs. I was already there. I had arrived 30 minutes early. I refused the wheelchair. I refused the walker. Instead, I stood by the window, leaning heavily on a sleek, carbon fiber cane with a silver handle. My legs trembled inside the stiff braces hidden beneath my tailored trousers, a constant, burning reminder of the nerves firing and misfiring, but I was standing. Lena stood to my right, holding a thick file folder. On my left sat David Archer and 2 other attorneys from the Hayes Legacy Trust, their faces unreadable masks of professional lethality. Opposite us sat the representatives from the syndicate of banks that held Blake Urban's debt, men in gray suits who smelled blood in the water. At 10 o'clock exactly, the double doors opened. Gregory and Lorraine Blake walked in. They had tried to maintain the facade. Gregory was wearing his signature navy pinstripe suit, and Lorraine was draped in a cashmere shawl, but the cracks were visible. My father's tie was slightly crooked, a detail he would never have missed 6 months ago. My mother's makeup was a little too heavy, trying to conceal the dark circles of sleepless nights. They looked like royalty in exile, still wearing the crowns, but terrified the mob was waiting outside. They expected to walk into a negotiation with a faceless hedge fund manager. They expected to charm, to bully, or to beg their way out of this, just like they always did. They stopped dead when they saw me. Gregory's eyes went to my face, then down to the cane, and then back up. He blinked, as if trying to reset a glitch in his vision. "Monica," he said. His voice was a mixture of confusion and irritation. "You are here too?" He looked at Richard Hale, who was standing at the head of the table. "Richard, why is my daughter here? Is this some sort of sentimental gesture? We are here to discuss serious financial matters, not family grievances." Lorraine stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "Did you come to beg for your allowance back, Monica? We told you, until you apologize for that slanderous interview." "Please take a seat," Richard cut in. His voice was not loud, but it had the weight of a gavel strike. "We have a lot to get through." My parents exchanged a look, a flicker of unease, but they took their seats on the opposite side of the table. They sat alone. Their usual entourage of yes-men and assistants was notably absent. "Let us begin," Richard said. He pressed a button on the console. The blinds descended automatically, plunging the room into a dim, serious light. The projector screen behind him flared to life. It was a massacre in red ink. "As of this morning," Richard began, his tone clinical, "Blake Urban Holdings is in technical default on 3 major loan covenants. Your debt-to-equity ratio has exceeded 4-to-1. Your liquidity reserves are below the mandatory minimum of $50 million, and your credit rating has been downgraded to junk status by all 3 major agencies." Gregory stiffened. "The market is volatile. We have assets. The downtown tower alone is worth $500 million. "The downtown tower is leveraged at 90%, Richard corrected him. "And with the current vacancy rate, it is bleeding $2 million a month in operating costs." He clicked to the next slide. "Furthermore, over the past 6 months, a single entity has been aggressively purchasing your outstanding bonds and secondary debt. This entity now holds 70% of your debt load. Effectively, they own the mortgage on your entire existence." "Who are they?" Gregory demanded, slamming his hand on the table. "Some vulture fund from New York? Let me talk to them. We can restructure. We can offer them equity." "We will get to that," Richard said. He slid a single sheet of paper across the obsidian table toward Gregory. "But first, per the terms of the master lending agreement, since you are in default, the majority creditor has the right to invoke the change of control clause. This document confirms that you understand this right exists. It is a procedural formality before we begin negotiations." Gregory snatched the paper. He scanned it, his jaw tight. He clearly thought this was just a hurdle to jump before he could work his charm on the new investors. He pulled a gold pen from his pocket, signed it with an angry flourish, and shoved it at Lorraine. She signed it without reading, her hands shaking slightly. "Fine," Gregory spat, sliding the paper back to Richard. "We acknowledge the position. Now, bring out the representative. Let us see who thinks they can swallow my company." Richard picked up the paper. He checked the signatures. Then, he looked up, his expression unreadable. "The representative is already here," Richard said. He turned his head and looked directly at me. "Ms. Blake, the floor is yours." The room went silent, the kind of silence that happens after a gunshot. Gregory slowly turned his head toward me. He looked at the cane. He looked at Lena. He looked at the lawyers sitting next to me. The color began to drain from his face, leaving it a sickly gray. "What is this?" Lorraine whispered. "Richard, this is not funny." I took a deep breath. I gripped the silver handle of my cane. "Step back, observe, then play your hand." I stood up. It was slow. My legs screamed in protest. The braces clicked softly, but I rose, inch by inch, until I was standing tall, looking down at them. I reached into my blazer pocket. I pulled out the metal box. I opened it and took out the silver card. I placed it on the black table. Clank! The sound echoed in the quiet room like a bell. I am the sole beneficiary of the Hayes Legacy Trust, I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the tears they had seen the last time we met. I am the majority creditor of Blake Urban Holdings, and I own 51% of the voting shares. Gregory stared at the card. He recognized the logo. He recognized the name Hayes, but his brain refused to connect the dots. Hayes? He stammered. Your grandfather? Walter? That is impossible. Walter was a nobody. He owned a hardware store. He died with nothing. He died with everything, I said. He saved you, Dad, 30 years ago. When you ran this company into the ground the first time, he bought you out. He let you keep the title. He let you keep the fame. He stayed silent because he did not care about the glory. He only cared about the family. Lorraine put a hand to her mouth. No, she gasped. My father. He hated business. He hated money. He hated greed. Mom, I corrected her. There is a difference. I looked them both in the eye. He left me the card with instructions. He gave me the power to dissolve the trust and take direct control if and only if the current management proved they had lost their moral compass. Moral compass? Gregory laughed. A desperate, high-pitched sound. This is business. Monica, you think you can run a billion-dollar conglomerate because you found a magic credit card? You are a child. You are a cripple. You will destroy everything. I am not the one who hired a trucking company with a failing safety record to save a few pennies, I said softly. Gregory stopped laughing. His mouth snapped shut. Richard, I said, not taking my eyes off my father. Play the video. Richard dimmed the lights further. On the massive screen, the image of my grandfather appeared. He was sitting in his workshop, wearing his flannel shirt. My parents flinched as if they had been physically struck. Hello, Gregory. Hello, Lorraine. Walter's voice rumbled through the surround sound system. Lorraine let out a small sob. If you are watching this, it means you messed up. Walter continued on the screen. It means you forgot where you came from. I gave you a long leash. I let you play the big shots, but I always kept the deed to the house. The Walter on the screen leaned forward. Monica is the only one of you with a spine made of something other than dollar bills. If she is standing there today, it is because you pushed her too far. So, here is the deal. From this moment on, Monica speaks for me. Her word is my word, and my word is that the party is over. The screen went black. For 10 seconds, no one moved, no one breathed. The board members were whispering furiously to each other. The bank's lawyers were nodding, confirming the legitimacy of the evidence. Gregory sat frozen. He looked at his hands, the hands that had signed the eviction order, the hands that had signed the waiver for the cheap trucks. He looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. He realized the magnitude of his mistake. He hadn't just kicked his disabled daughter out into the rain, he had kicked out his boss. You, Gregory whispered, his voice shaking. You planned this. You let us bleed. I let you show me who you were, I said. Grandpa trusted the wrong people. I am correcting that mistake. I tapped the file folder Lena was holding. This file contains the foreclosure notice on the commercial loans, I said, and the shareholder resolution removing both of you from the board of directors, effective immediately. You cannot do this, Lorraine shrieked, standing up. We are your parents. And I am the chairman of the board, I replied. I turned to Richard. The room felt suspended in time, caught in the amber of absolute shock. And that was the moment. Richard Hale, the bank manager who had overseen hundreds of hostile takeovers, who had seen empires rise and fall, sat back in his chair. He looked at the papers Gregory had just signed. He looked at the screen where the organizational chart had just updated. He looked at me, the woman standing on trembling legs, leaning on a cane, with a scratched silver card on the table before her. He froze, because he realized what everyone else in the room was just beginning to understand. The screen behind me displayed the new reality in stark white letters. Majority creditor, Monica Blake. Controlling shareholder, Monica Blake. Chief restructuring officer, Monica Blake. The daughter they had called a burden was now the only thing holding up the sky. Richard Hale cleared his throat, the sound breaking the trance that had descended upon the room. He gestured toward me with an open palm, a movement that formally transferred the weight of the meeting and the fate of the company onto my shoulders. "Ms. Blake," Richard said, his voice deferential. "As the representative of the Hayes Legacy Trust and the controlling shareholder, the board awaits your proposal." I did not sit down. Standing was painful. The braces on my legs felt like iron clamps, and the muscles in my lower back were screaming with the effort of holding myself upright, but I would not sit, not while they were sitting. "The situation is simple," I began. My voice was steady, echoing slightly against the glass walls. "Blake Urban Holdings is insolvent. Under normal circumstances, the bank would foreclose, the assets would be liquidated, and the 3,000 employees working for this company would lose their jobs by Monday morning." I saw the other board members flinch. They knew I was right. "However," I continued, "I am not here to bury this company. I am here to save it. I am prepared to authorize an immediate capital injection of $300 million from the trust. This will cover the outstanding debt service, stabilize our credit rating, and ensure that payroll is met for the next 24 months. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. The banker on the far left actually uncrossed his arms, but Gregory and Lorraine did not look relieved. They looked suspicious. They knew nothing in our world came for free. "There are conditions," I said, turning my gaze directly to my parents. "What conditions?" Gregory asked, his voice tight. "Governance reform," I said. "Effective immediately. Gregory and Lorraine Blake will resign as CEO and COO. You will vacate your seats on the board of directors. You will surrender all company cars, corporate credit cards, and access to company properties. And you will sign a binding non-compete agreement that prohibits you from using the name Blake in any future real estate ventures in the state of Colorado." Lorraine stood up so fast her chair tipped backward and hit the wall. "You are insane," she hissed, her face flushing a deep, angry red. "You think you can just walk in here and strip us of our titles? We built this. We are the brand. You are just an ungrateful, bitter child throwing a tantrum because we did not hold your hand when you got hurt." She turned to the board, pleading her case. "She is unstable. You cannot listen to her. This is a family dispute she is dragging into the boardroom. We have rights. We have a legacy." "Legacy," I repeated the word. It tasted like ash. "You talk about legacy? You talk about what you gave me?" I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. I set it on the table and opened it. "You called me ungrateful, Mom. You said I was bitter. Let us remind everyone why I might feel that way." I pressed the spacebar. The audio file was clear. I had recorded it on my phone that night in the drawing room, the night my life fell apart. It was a habit from my project management days, record every critical meeting. Gregory's voice filled the silent conference room, sharp and dismissive. "We do not have an obligation to pay the price for your mistakes." Then Lorraine's voice, cold and dripping with disdain. "It is for the best. Better you go now, before the neighbors see you. We do not do charity cases, not even for family." I let the recording play until the sound of the front door closing echoed through the speakers. Then I stopped it. The silence that followed was absolute. The board members looked down at their polished shoes, unable to meet my parents' eyes. The cruelty was not abstract anymore. It was visceral. It was recorded. Lorraine sank back into her chair, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Gregory, however, was not done. He was a fighter, a man who would burn the house down before he let someone else take the keys. He stood up, smoothing his tie, trying to regain his composure. Fine, he said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. We were harsh. We were under pressure. It was a mistake, but that does not change the fact that we raised you. Monica, we put the clothes on your back. We paid for your private schools. We paid for your Stanford tuition. We carried you for 30 years. Does that count for nothing? You owe us. You raised me? I asked quietly. I picked up the leather binder Richard had given me. I opened it to the financial records section. The documents Grandpa Walter had kept hidden for decades. I thought so too. Dad, I said. But then I looked at the ledgers. I slid a stack of documents down the table. They fanned out across the black obsidian surface. That is the receipt for my Stanford tuition, I said, pointing to the top page. Paid by a cashier's check from Walter Hayes. That is the mortgage payoff for the Boulder estate in 1998, paid by Walter Hayes. And that? I pointed to a thick document with a red seal. That is the corporate bailout from 2008, when you leveraged the company to buy those toxicity swampland deals in Florida. The bank came for the keys then, too. Grandpa wrote a check for $50 million to cover your losses. He saved you, he fed you, he housed you, and he educated me. I leaned forward on my cane, my eyes locking with his. You did not raise me, Dad. You were just the middleman handling Grandpa's money. Gregory looked at the documents. He picked up one, his hands trembling violently. He read the signature at the bottom, Walter Hayes. The myth of the self-made tycoon crumbled in his hands. He looked small. He looked old. He never told me, Gregory whispered. He let me believe. He let you keep your dignity, I said, because he loved his daughter, and he hoped that eventually you would become the man you pretended to be, but you never did. I looked around the room. The board members were nodding. The bank representatives looked ready to sign whatever I put in front of them. They wanted the $300 million. They wanted safety. They did not care about Gregory Blake anymore. So here is the deal, I said, my voice hardening. You taught me that everything in life is a transaction. Love is a transaction. Loyalty is a transaction. So today, I am making the final transaction. I pushed 2 thick legal packets toward them. I saved the company. I saved the jobs of 3,000 people. I saved the Blake family name from the humiliation of a public bankruptcy. In exchange, you sign these resignation letters, you leave this building, and you leave my life, forever. And if we refuse? Lorraine asked, her voice thin and reedy. Then I walk out that door, I said. I withhold the capital. The bank calls the loans at noon. The company files for Chapter 7 liquidation by 5 o'clock. You lose the house, the cars, the reputation, and every cent you have to pay off the creditors. You will be destitute by the weekend. I looked at my watch. You have 5 minutes to decide. It did not take 5 minutes. The lawyers for the bank leaned in and whispered to Gregory. It was not advice. It was a command. Sign the papers, or we destroy you. Gregory picked up the pen. He looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes, only the bitter realization that he had been outplayed by the pawn he threw away. He signed. He slid the papers to Lorraine. She was crying now, silent, self-pitying tears. She signed her name with a shaky hand. Monica, she sniffed, looking up at me as she capped the pen. Where will we go? The estate? The cars? Are you really going to put your parents out on the street? The question hung in the air, pathetic and heavy. I looked at the woman who had watched me cry in a wheelchair and told me I was bad for property values. I am not kicking anyone out, Mom, I said softly. I am just opening the door so you can step out of my life. I signaled to the security guards. Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Blake to the exit. Their personal effects will be boxed and shipped to, well, wherever they decide to go. They stood up. They looked stripped, without the title, without the company, without the lie of their own success. They were just 2 selfish people in expensive clothes. They walked toward the side door, heads bowed, avoiding the gaze of the people they used to command. As the door clicked shut behind them, the room exhaled. Ms. Blake, Richard said, a small smile playing on his lips. "We have the papers. The funds can be transferred immediately." "Do it," I said. I turned to leave. Lena moved to help me, bringing the wheelchair, but I shook my head. "No," I said. "I walked in. I am walking out." It was a long walk to the main doors. My legs were trembling uncontrollably by the time I reached the lobby. The pain was a sharp, biting fire in my spine, but I kept my rhythm. Step, cane, step, cane. I walked past the reception desk where the girl had yawned at me 6 months ago. She stood up as I passed, her eyes wide with recognition and respect. I pushed open the glass doors and stepped out into the Denver sunlight. The air was crisp and cold. Lena brought the car around, a sleek sedan I had bought the week before, modified with hand controls so I could drive it myself. Though today Lena was driving, I sank into the passenger seat, letting out a long, shuddering breath as I unbuckled the braces. "You did it," Lena whispered, starting the engine. "You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected her. I reached into my purse and pulled out the silver card. I looked at it one last time. The scratches on the surface seemed to glow in the afternoon sun. "You know," I said, staring at the embossed letters, "Grandpa told me this was a rope to pull myself out of the hole, but I think he knew better." "What do you mean?" Lena asked, merging into traffic. "It wasn't a rope," I said, running my thumb over the edge. "It was a pair of scissors. I used it to cut the cords that were holding me down." That night, I stood on the balcony of my new home. The city of Denver was spread out before me, a grid of golden lights shimmering in the darkness. To the north, I could see the outline of the Blake Tower. Standing tall against the skyline, it was still standing because of me. I held the metal box in my hands. Inside, the silver card rested on its velvet bed. I closed the lid. Click. I locked the box and placed it on the high shelf of my closet, next to a framed photo of Grandpa Walter and a picture of Ethan. I walked back out to the railing, leaning on it for support. My legs were tired, but they held me. My parents had chosen money over their daughter. My grandfather had chosen his granddaughter over his money. And me? I took a deep breath of the mountain air. I had chosen to stand on my own 2 feet. The rest of the story wasn't written in a ledger or a will. It was mine to write, one step at a time, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the blank page. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on whether you think I did the right thing. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and redemption, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people who need to be reminded that they are stronger than they think.